I'm Holly, I'm a writer, and I thought I would do a mix between a book haul and talking about my next project that I'm going to be working on, which is in the planning stage, you know, the logistics part. So I want to start this video by just saying that it is a book which you will very quickly, if you didn't already, guess the theme of. I think I've talked about it, but I'm gonna do the book haul first. These are some secondhand books that I bought, and they're all being used for research purposes. Now, this is the stack. It's only 3 books, so I will get into the talking about the book soon, don't worry. So I'm gonna start with this book, which I didn't actually buy, like, it was recent, but it wasn't super recent. I bought all of these at the same time because it meant I got free shipping. But this is The Struggle for Europe by Chester Wilmot, and this is one of those books that is considered to be like the sort of book about the Second World War, and specifically in Europe. And so this was secondhand because they're not in production anymore. This next book that I also have is in the same collection. It's the Wordsworth Military Library. This one is in better condition. The spine on the other one is a little bit worse. But it smells like an old book, but not like a used book. Do you know what I mean? Like it smells like the part in the library where they keep all of the really old books, and I love it. The spine is super cracked, but it's a 700-page book, and it's inevitable not to crack the spine because it goes right down to the margins. The text in this book is so tiny, and I checked the other one. The other one has normal size text, so it's just this text, which is absolutely tiny. It's like twice as many lines per page, so it takes me twice as long-ish to read this, especially because it's non-fiction, which is like slower anyway. But there are a lot of diagrams. There's a lot of like references to other books. I have really been enjoying this. I will say, like, as dense as it is, and it is dense, and as long as it takes me to get through it, which makes me feel like I'm going absolutely insane because I'll read for like 2 hours and I'll read like 50 pages. It is so bad, but like it's so interesting, and it's kind of funny, not in like not in like, oh, it's so funny way, but in the sense that this talks about every army from the logs and stuff, and including like telephones, you know, the notes of conversations. And so you've got the telephone conversations that would happen, and it would be like the American leaders didn't think that this plan would work, and they didn't think it would work despite the fact that the Germans were at that point like, oh my god, if they were to do a plan of this sort it would destroy us. And like a lot of stuff with the American leadership, which was objectively not very good. Like they did some bad stuff in terms of making decisions that made the war longer, or in being indecisive and making the war longer. And that's not to say that England didn't have mistakes too, but it very much seems like America had more power, but England had a better strategy in this. Like there's a lot of nuance to it, and it's really interesting to read, and it's quite funny to see the stupidity of some of the people who are supposed to be really smart and leading the war effort. The German side is laughable. There are some quotes about the German side where it would be like, and Rommel asked for this, and he thought that they should do this, and he was like, hey, can we have some more power down here, please? And he would be told like, no, by multiple people, including Hitler. And then everything that he had asked for would have turned out to be necessary and would have won them battles and stuff, because he like knew he was one of the better people on that side, not morally but like in terms of capability, whereas Hitler, it wasn't very good. And rather than getting like more confident as the war went on that his people knew what they needed because they were proved correct by the things that they had said, like, hey, this is gonna happen if you don't do what I tell you to do now, please do it. Instead of seeing that and being like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe I should give you a bit more power. He was like, clearly this is a sign of you being a coward and a traitor. And so he would draw it back. And like, when you read it like that, it's like, oh, we won the war because we were slightly less stupid, right? Not great, but it's how it was, and I feel like it's really interesting, and it is quite funny to see the incompetence of some of these people and to be like, oh god, because thankfully obviously we won, but if we hadn't, it, like, we should have, you know, there was no way that we couldn't have if we had just, because they were so bad, like I can't, like, I can't express it. I've been posting, I have a bookstagram. I call it like my reading diary, because I like to take pictures of stuff that I like and to look back on and to remember what books I was reading. I will leave the in my description for this video, but it's called Reading with My Monstera. I have a Swiss cheese plant, which is why I've got that name. But basically, this, because it's such a long book, has a lot of posts about it, and I honestly would go and recommend that you look at them. There are some that are just genuinely, it's like these people were on the war, like the front lines of the war, and they just were so funny, even though they were being like really assaulted very heavily by troops much stronger than their own. Like, it's really interesting to read. It's also really funny. Every now and then the narrator was a war correspondent, and so he occasionally he will be like, in fact, that is not what happened. Like, he will just pop in and be like a little bit more informal, because he was there and he was seeing stuff, and he was like, yeah, no, they're just lying through their teeth in these orders. He was like, I don't know what German intelligence was on, but that is not what was going on in England. They were just lying for the sake of it. Literally, to make Hitler do stuff, they would lie. But also sometimes they just fully were like wrong. And there are so many, like, it's really interesting and funny. And there is a foreword in this which points out that the author died before the Cold War ended and before the knowledge of like the way that the Russian army was during the Second World War was really known. And so there are certain things that are maybe inaccurate or a bit biased about that because of the time period when the book was written, but it uses stuff from like the Nuremberg trials. It uses like all of the evidence that was brought forward. He himself interrogated some of the commanders, the generals and whatnot of the army. He was there. He landed on D-Day in one of the gliders in Sixth Airborne. So he was there on D-Day. He landed with the Sixth Airborne. He, you know, has a lot of experience of the war, and there are a lot of things that he mentions that maybe weren't privy to a lot of people at the time. And so it's really interesting, and I think it is quite a fun read, but it also is very heavy. It's so dense. It takes so long to get through. But I'm nearly at the end. I'm like 3 days of reading away from the end. The next one, which is in the same collection, as I said, very different in the way that it is like formatted, and it's only 300 pages. But this is The Longest Day. Cornelius Ryan wrote this book, and then I think this book got turned into a film. Like, there's definitely a film called The Longest Day. Maybe the film was in the 60s. On the thing, you can decide that. But it basically is this quote where it says, from Rommel, "The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive. The fate of Germany depends on the outcome. For the Allies as well as Germany, it will be the longest day." And he did actually say, like, hey, if they get off the beaches, we're done. So he was like the only person in Germany who was like, hey, maybe we should defend the beaches at Normandy. Maybe we should do that. And they didn't really allow him to in the way that he wanted. But also he did that very late because German intelligence was not very intelligent. But this, it's very short, but it's supposed to be one of those books that's like really helpful. And I don't know what else to say about it. I haven't read this, so I don't know how useful it's actually going to be. But it's one of those ones where, like, even if it doesn't end up being useful for the book purposes, I feel like reading it is still kind of important because it's like one of those books, you know? It's one of those books that, like, The Struggle for Europe, I had to buy secondhand. I physically could get, like, there was not a new copy of this. you can get new copies of this, but it was like 14 or 16.99, which books in the UK, for anyone who isn't, you know, like in the UK, or like specifically in like England and whatnot, where they use like the currency and whatnot that I use, I usually would say that books are 8 to 9 to 10.99, right? Like between, I've had books that were 7.99 as well. I've had books that were 6.99. I got a copy of Romeo and Juliet for £2.49. Like books are a lot cheaper here than they are in mainland Europe, and especially in like America and Canada and Australia and stuff. And I don't know what it's like with the exchange rate, but I'm pretty sure that it's still more expensive. So yeah, like to see a book of that price, for me, I was like, whoa. And when I saw this copy that was the same edition, like the same range as this one, the same like publisher and the same sort of style, I did buy it. It is in lesser good quality. The spine's definitely been in the sun, I'd imagine like on a windowsill or something, because it's literally just the spine that is, it's like yellow, whereas the actual stuff is red because it's been bleached. But apart from the spine and apart from it being a little wonky, it's not very straight, it is in decent condition. Like, I'm not complaining about it at all. And especially I kind of like a book of this size, I do like when it's been a bit worn in, because otherwise you know that like the spine is gonna crack anyway, especially because like this is a non-fiction. I'm taking pictures of the pages when I need to, so I need to keep it as flat as possible, and that's helpful. But I can't talk about it too much because I don't know, but it's The Longest Day by Cornelius Ryan, and I've heard a lot about it, not in terms of what it's actually like, but only in that it's good. So I'm gonna trust. I've also heard a lot about this one, and this is a newer copy. I say a newer copy. When was this edition published? Because it's not like a new copy, I will say that much. 2019, so 6 years, which is fine. Oh wait, was it the... Oh, okay, so it's the 75th anniversary of D-Day, not of the book. Yeah, because it was first published in 2009. Okay, that makes more sense to me, because I was just like, how old is this guy? Because the others are published in like the 50s, the 40s sort of stuff. This one is newer. So it's the 75th anniversary edition with a new foreword, but that's the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landing. So this is D-Day by Anthony Beevor, and it's The Battle for Normandy is like the subtitle. And this, this is the exact copy that I would get if I paid. Again, it was either 14 or 16.99. One of them was 16, one of them was 14. I feel like this was probably 16 because it's so much thicker that it would be kind of insane if this was the cheaper one. But I can check that, mostly because I want to point out how ridiculous it is. But this as well, Max Hastings talks about it, and I've heard so many good things about Max Hastings as a whole. And I read Sword and I really liked it. And I'm asking for like my birthday Overlord by Max Hastings, which I think will be pretty good. You then have this picture, which actually is very famous. It's called The Jaws of Death or something. Again, I'll look that up and I'll put it on for your benefit. You should be so grateful. The things that I do. It is way harder than it seems. But this book is about D-Day, as you can probably imagine. This is a contents page, which it's probably very similar to The Struggle for Europe, but it's got the hindsight that that book didn't, because it is published so much later. So like it talks about the same sort of stuff, the different beaches. I will say I'm quite happy that all of the different beaches get their own, except for Golden Juno, which are put together. Omaha gets one, which makes sense. Utah and the airborne forces there, they get their own little thing. Sword gets its own. That's nice. You also have the stuff that happens immediately after. You have the stuff that went on a bit later with like Goodwood, the assassination plot for Hitler, blah blah blah. Basically, there is a lot of stuff that is going to get mentioned. There are actual proper pictures, because this is a more modern book, and modern books don't have to just use pictures printed onto regular paper, they can use proper printing photo paper. I love finding stuff in secondhand books. Like, that is so random. But okay. I kind of love it. It's like a hint of the previous owner has remained. Which, yeah. And then is this. This is a preview for a different book about Arnhem, which for some reason they've used chapter 8 as the preview, which is kind of interesting, but I guess it makes sense because non-fiction you have to kind of build up to the exciting stuff. I kind of find the non-exciting stuff exciting. But yeah, there's also maps in here. So many maps. I'm so bad at maps, okay? This isn't even... The person who I was with when I did this is probably watching this video. I'm gonna talk about it. Story for you. So I was in Manchester it was actually, I can tell you, I was with a friend of mine because we were going to watch John Mulaney at the O2, I think, or at the Apollo or something. I might be getting confused. It was at a theatre, and we were going to watch comedy, right? And we were trying to get from where we were. This was a few years ago now. We were at a McDonald's. We had some lunch because I say lunch, it was dinner because it was like 6 o'clock. And we were like, we need to start heading towards the theatre so that we know where we are and that we're not like late, you know? We have time to get settled basically. And we got there fine. Don't worry if you're on the edge of your seats because you're like, did you get there in time? Yes, we did. It was a great show, by the way. It was so fun. I had Google Maps on my phone, okay? I had Google Maps. I had the actual place that I wanted to go on my phone, okay? I had it on my phone. I sent us on a 30-minute journey. Bearing in mind that the theatre was legitimately, I think, maybe like 10-15 minutes away walking. I made us walk a 30-minute circle around Manchester, and I only realised because my friend was like, hey, that's the McDonald's that we just left. And so, like, I was following, and I don't even know how I did this. I was following the map, but I was following the directions to the place that we started rather than where we were trying to go. So he ended up being in charge of the navigation from then onwards. It went, like, I figured it out. It was fine. And we got there and it was fine. But like, I'm not good with maps, okay? You show me a map, I'm like, what does this even mean? Am I supposed to understand what this means? And so, like, I see these maps and I'm like, yeah, technically I understand what I'm looking at, but also, is that the land or is that the ocean? And the thing is that genuinely sometimes it does take me a few minutes of looking at the map to be like, oh no, that's the sea. Okay, because they're not coloured in, okay? There's no difference between the two. Or sometimes the land is lighter than the ocean, and I'm like, well, why is the land not the darker thing? You know? But, like, it doesn't matter. I'm just not good at navigation in that way. I'm very good at, like, I could take a journey once and I can remember to take that journey again. Like, if I go to a place on holiday, I know my way around within, like, a day of being there, and I can walk around without needing a map, right? But I'm not good when I need the map. So I'm really good at navigating in like an intuition sort of sense, but not from a map sense, which is why it's so annoying that I have to look at all of these maps and they all have arrows on them because most of them are like, and this is where this person landed and this is where this person then had to walk, and I'm like, ugh. But anyway, it's super helpful in theory. I'm an idiot. Like, I try really hard not to be, but I am. And so, yeah. This book I'm hoping will be really, again, helpful. And perhaps because it's more modern, it'll cover some things that weren't known. But yeah, that was my second book, and it's actually in really good condition apart from the spine, which I don't blame the person for because it's a thick book and you have to crack the spine. This third book This is significantly older. I think that was 1959 and 2009. This one you can see very immediately when you look at it how much older it is, just from the like everything. 1950. So this is a hardback. There's no sleeve, like a dust jacket. This is The Red Beret, The Story of the Parachute Regiment 1940 to 1945 by Hilary St. George Saunders. I have started recently because of the fact that I'm writing a book. If you haven't guessed, this is set during the Second World War, and specifically a huge part of the events is D-Day, right? So there are a lot of French names because they landed in France. I have started automatically going with the French. So I see George and I'm like, oh, Georges. It's not good. I have multiple times in my own head called King Charles III King Charles. And I don't think I've admitted that to anyone until now, and I've just decided that I was going to admit it for the internet. So that's fun. But like, I have been very French minded recently, and it's interesting. But basically, this book, this is so difficult to find. This is not in print. Apparently there's one called The Green Beret, which is about the commandos. But like, look how fun that is. This is like the immediate paper. I don't know what they're called. End paper? But I like the red. I like that it's a different colour than the rest of the map. Because that is a big problem for me, is reading multiple things of the same thing. I feel like that, as just like the title page, the first title page, shows its age. Also pencil markings on the title page, that always to me is like a secondhand book thing. Yeah, like it's so minimal, but it's about the parachute regiment during the war. Oh yeah, and the foreword of this book, because of how old it is literally from Montgomery, like Field Marshal the Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, to give his full title. There is a quote from this book, by the way. One of the main reasons why I wanted this is because there is a quote from this. I have an epitaph. Yeah, that's true. Epitaph? Epigraph. No, epitaph is the grave one, right? Doesn't matter. Anyway, I have two quotes at the beginning of the book that I'm writing because it's actually a duology. The first book is about a parachutist who is part of the airborne regiment. And then you have the second book, which is about his brother who came by the sea landings because he was just regular army. And I feel like it is quite interesting. This quote that I use from this book I got from Sky Warriors, perhaps, by Saul David, and I really liked it. Sorry, I'm gonna show you the foreword because that's really sweet. I love old books so much. This one smells like Christmas decorations, and I say that in the sense that like we keep our Christmas decorations in the loft, so it smells like my loft, which I love the smell of. It's just so old. It's definitely more delicate than the others, which I'm being careful with it in a way that like I'm not showing you too much. But yeah, this records the things that the parachute regiment did. Yeah, it basically talks about the Red Berets, which was the name given to the parachute regiment because they wore red berets. The airborne people wore red berets. So here's one of them, and there is a quote from this that's used in the epigraph where it talks about them. There's also a Winston Churchill quote from a speech that he gave about them, which I also got from Sky Warriors, but I really like them, and when I read them I was like, that needs to be in this book. Like, that needs to be in this book. So the foreword is actually like a handwritten thing. Obviously it's not handwritten, but it's like it's been screened in. So that's his handwriting. And this is one of the quotes that I use, actually, is they have jumped from the air and by doing so have conquered fear. But yeah, he says, what manner of men are those who wear the maroon red beret? They are in fact men apart, every man an emperor. And he did like using them. He used them as much as he was able. obviously once they got to Europe. The 6th Airborne, fun fact if you didn't know this, didn't exist, like they weren't formed until very late, and they were only first used during like the Normandy. Anyway, basically this book is about the Red Berets, also known as the Red Devils, and it talks about a bunch of the stuff that they did, specifically while they were, you know, out in the field. And there's a bunch of illustrations of like the attack plans, there's some pictures which are really interesting, but I feel like this will be genuinely very helpful because there's also a book that I want to read which is about the specific division that his brother is going to be in, the Gaunt coming from the sea, but he is one of the people who wears the Red Beret, and it's kind of shockingly difficult to actually learn more about them and specifically what they did. But that's the last of those books, and I feel like that gives you a solid idea of the story. Obviously the actual plot, I don't want to talk too much about it because again, I haven't written it yet, I haven't done too much of the specific planning stuff. All I know is that there are 2 brothers. One of them is a parachutist, the other is a regular soldier, and they both have very different attitudes about war. They both are in pretty different positions within the war. They're different ages, they have different sort of personalities outside of the war, and it's about the way that these 2 brothers are in the war and the way that it affects them. I have said this before, I am not an endorser of war. I actually am really against, especially like Britain as like the country that I'm from, the use of our armies in the political interferences that it has been involved in throughout the time. I think, for example, a big one is the war in Vietnam that I actually have a plan to write about. I started a Substack where I talk about real stuff. You know, it's like more like journalism than just like a blog, where, for example, my first post, which I haven't actually finished yet, but which I'm gonna be posting this week, besides my introduction post, is going to be about the use of famine as a tool of genocide, and specifically looking at a few examples of how it's been used, including currently in Palestine. And so there are a lot of things that I have in terms of my personal life experiences. I haven't ever been in a war situation, but I'm very aware of the fact that there are a lot of people who have been engaged in very brutal, awful lifestyles, not because it was necessary in the way that the Second World War was necessary in order to prevent the suffering of people on a grander scale, but in the way that it, like, you know, is used as a way of gaining people money and power. And I think that it's really interesting to write a book about the war in that perspective, because I kind of cover both ends of the spectrum, but I would hope that they both come across as critical. Like, I will write one of the brothers to be maybe more enthusiastic about war and to be quite proud of the work that he does and to really enjoy it and take to it, sort of thing. But that doesn't mean that I'm writing that because I think that that's how it should be. I'm writing that as a way of criticizing it, perhaps in a more subtle way, but like, I'm hoping it'll come across. But if you're like worried because like it's a book about the war, I wouldn't be. I also will say that I want to discuss, for example, sexuality. It was illegal at the time in the UK to be gay, and this is not now, but it's still not great. And so I want to talk about that a little bit and discuss some of the nuances of that, especially among soldiers. And I think that that is like the best I can do to describe this book, is that it's about 2 brothers who go to war in slightly different ways for the same country, and the experiences that they have and how it impacts them, which is what all books are, really. It's about how events impact characters. But I want to do it, especially like as a woman. I think that women have not been allowed to take part in fighting. They are still discriminated against when it comes to discussions of war. You still to this day have men who are like, well, if you want equality, does that mean you want to be able to fight in wars then? You want you to go off and fight in wars instead of the men? It's like, first of all, you're not a soldier, so like, let's not have that conversation. Second of all, no, because that's not what I want for anyone to be doing. I don't think that we should have wars in a world where we have the ability to communicate more freely than ever. Like, I don't feel like that is a valid criticism. It's not a valid criticism. It's not just I don't think it's just not is like a good argument. It's the same as the people who are like, oh, so can I hit you then? No, because you can't hit people because that's assault. But you know, if you wanted to hit me and you weren't just because I was a woman, then yeah, sure, go ahead, do it. I'll press charges. It'll be fine. It'll go the way it should, you know? Please don't hit me though, I'm very sensitive. But like, you know what I mean, right? Like, it's specifically physical violence is used as an argument against equality. It's used as a point of weakness against women, that women are less likely to use physical acts of violence compared to sort of like mental and emotional violence, which I think it's kind of interesting then as a woman for me to talk about this topic, which I find really interesting, and I really love the Second World War as a topic, but I don't love it because I love war and I think that war's good. And I think that there are a lot of writers who maybe write stories about war because they want to be like, look how marvelous these soldiers were, these groups of people were together. And I want to kind of deconstruct that. And I'm not saying that other people have done that necessarily with that intention, but I think that there are a lot of men who see war films especially, and they think, you know, it's like the Fight Club thing, where like Fight Club isn't about being a brute and that being cool. It's like the opposite of that, but that's the message that some people get from it. And I think that if I can, as a woman, step in and write something that's a bit more obviously not that, it might also educate people on the war in a kind of fun way. Because there are going to be a lot of people who don't like reading nonfiction, who maybe don't know about the stuff that was going on in D-Day and the follow-up to D-Day. Do you say follow-up? I don't think you do. I'm gonna be honest, I was like so prepared to make this video, and then I actually was like thinking about doing it, and my brain hasn't clicked in today. It's just not, but it's fine. But yeah, I think that I want to write a war book with those basic things and with that sort of mindset, and I'm just gonna see where it goes. And I really like it so far. I have started to write it, not in like a serious way, but I wrote like the first 2,000 or so words, and I've decided to change the perspective to third because it makes more sense, I think, if I'm also writing about his brother, to do third person rather than first. But I am really happy with what I wrote so far, and I think that while there are some things that I've needed to edit for like with the information that I've gained since, and this is the thing, it's really difficult, okay? It's so tough to know what it was like to be a paratrooper, and I feel like I'm gonna have such an easy time with the sea landing brother because like, oh, then I can tell you their names. Their names are Milton and August, and Milton is the paratrooper, he's the para, and then August is he's just a general army guy. Not general like a general like normal, you know, nothing too special about him. Which I think it's interesting to cover the two different. I'm super excited for that. I think that it will be a perfect, like this vampire book where I'm really enjoying writing it. I think that it's the right sort of time for me to be writing a book about the war. I know what I want to do, and I'm getting to engage in a productive way with something that I'm currently like super obsessed with, to the point that I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just read this book next. So even though I've read, I think, a few in a row, basically, war books, I'm eager to read these 3 more. And yeah, I'm hoping that's super descriptive, you know? Like, I can't say anything else. So if that doesn't count as like being good enough, good enough to myself, by the way. I feel like I have so many details about this story, about this world, that I can't talk about because they're spoilers. Like, they're significant pieces of the story, and I can tell you their names are August and Milton. I can tell you that one is a paratrooper and one is a, you know, a regular guy in the army, and I can tell you that it takes place in the D-Day landings. But like, I don't want to, because like, you know, this is a war. There are going to be characters who die. I'm not going to say who they are. They might be like barely noticeable deaths, you know, like the minor characters that you don't even really care about. But there could be some major characters. I haven't even decided everyone that's going to die yet. I've decided a few people, like their fates, but yeah, I think that like the way that I want to do this is just the most important part right now to know, is that I'm doing it with the perspective of somebody who has a lot of respect for the people that fought in the war, because it was a really important occasion. Like, obviously it's the kind of thing that we need right now, not in the way that it's gone about so far, but in the sense that like there is a certain country in the world that is bullying a lot of other countries and committing a lot of war crimes, and no one's doing anything about it. And so if somebody was to do something about it in the way that we did something about it in the late 30s, I think that it would be really interesting, you know, morally speaking, that we would do that in a good way. And I think that there is a lot of stuff that I have in the way of feelings about these sorts of things, but like, my belief is that unless something is for the actual benefit, and you know, it's to save lives of people, that like, let's be real, they're never gonna stop, not even if they get what they want, because what they really want is for everyone there to be dead, right? You know where I mean. And like, there are a lot of places right now that are experiencing difficulties, and I'm spoken about that in my Substack, which I will also leave the like link to, I think, if you want to go check that out. But like, I promise I'm more educated than I seem. I just don't know how to talk. I am better at writing than I'm at talking. I will say that a million times if I have to. But I do think that my perspective on war is one where it's kind of interesting to consider that I would write this. Also, I am going to be quoting Blackadder Part 4, as like, I plan on at the end of my book doing a bibliography, so that people who want to learn more, or maybe learn where I got the information that I used, while it's fiction, you know, you don't have to. I'm not going to be like putting notes on like the specific stuff, but I will leave links, you know, to, not links because it's a book, but I'll be leaving stuff so that you could go on and read it if you wanted to, and be like, oh, I'll maybe read that book, and you can learn more about it. And I think that that's kind of the vibe that I want going in, is that, you know, Blackadder's on there because it's that sort of the vibe of like a group of soldiers who do stuff while they're waiting for stuff to happen, but also at the same time the more serious stuff. And like, it is, I'm hoping, going to be one of those books that maybe emotionally devastates a few people, because if it does that, it means that you've succeeded when you're writing a book like that as an author. It means that you've managed to make your audience feel the way that war should make them feel. You should feel a little bit hollowed out. And I feel like that, you know, it's not the most descriptive. It's not like I'm like, this is the character and this is what they do and this is their personality. But you know, that's not necessarily the most important thing. It's important how they are developed because of the war, more than how they are. And so I don't want to spoil their journeys, basically. And you'll read them, hopefully. If you're watching this video still at this point, you're probably going to be interested in the book, let's be real, because how many people are reading this still? Okay, I'm going to take that as my hint. But yeah, basically I'm writing this and I'm hoping historical fiction of a completely pure kind may be okay. I know that historical romance is not doing as well, but I don't know if historical fiction is doing alright. My dream would be if I wrote these books and they were like considered to be very good by people, because I will admit that I'm still at a point where I value other people's opinion of my work than my own, which is not great, but I'm getting there. I have started to value myself a lot more as a writer, and I do like some of the stuff that I write. I think it's quite good, but I still like validation a lot, and so I'm hoping that people will find them good and respectful, but also, you know, accurate without compromising the entertainment, and that they will get like turned into a film with someone like Steven Spielberg or something, and then they'll reach a broader audience but still have the same message, the same heart to them, which I think is really important. And that, as I said, is all that I can really give you. So anyway, I feel like I've just waffled about nothing, which is fine, but is it? But yeah, I will recommend The Struggle for Europe if you're a big reader of non-fiction and you want to learn more about the war. It's very comprehensive. It is very dense, but I'm liking it. Like, I'm not frustrated at how much there is. I'm frustrated at the fact that it takes me so long to read how much there is, which is more frustration at the formatting than the book itself, which is not his fault. Also, I want to say, like, as with the stuff about me not endorsing the war, I feel like this is probably a good chance for me to say that, like, I don't endorse people who are objectively not good people. If any of the authors, I don't know, I don't look into them, okay? If, for example, Chester Wilmot was a bad guy, I'm not gonna blame him for that, because I think he died very early into the, well, not early, but like fairly early, like definitely before I was born, right? I'm not gonna hold that against him. What I do think, though, is that we shouldn't idolize these people, and that includes the real people behind the war. I am, like, very specifically trying to fictionalize as many people as I can that my characters come into close contact with. The people that actually fought the war will also be given credit in the books. That's very important to me, but I won't be using fictional versions of real people unless absolutely necessary. Which is why I'm doing so much research, basically, is because this is a very real event, and unlike the other stuff where I've also done very real research, that was to help me make something that was realistic just for the sake of not having something that was complete nonsense. This is me making it realistic because I think that it's about respect. Respect for the people who actually lost their lives, or whose lives were changed for the worse, perhaps, or whose lives went on to be just generally very, very different. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that not all of the people were good, but that I can still give them credit for doing something collectively that was good, right? And like, I can also, it's like this book says, you can give credit to like the Germans for being smart at moments and for having like persistence and good spirit without at all appreciating the way that they gained that spirit, which was by being hateful and incredibly violent towards people that did not deserve it in any way, shape, or form, and to excessive extents, right? Like, there is a difference, and I feel like I need to just say that before I end this video, because it's hard to talk about stuff like this without having a serious attitude, but also that's not the way that I speak about stuff on this channel, you know? Like, I can talk about it and be like, yeah, this is really interesting to read, and I really liked reading about these people, and I have like a newfound respect for this person, blah blah, but it doesn't mean that I actually agree with their beliefs, right? Like, if you ever hear me say anything and you're like, don't think that, because it's not. And again, I'm anti-war, so it's more from like a historical, like, nerd out moment. But I think that's important because I don't want wires getting crossed, and especially writing a book about the war. Again, like, I cannot stress enough, this is not an endorsement of war. It just is a period of time that I'm so interested in, and I think, like, as somebody who is very mentally ill and who loves writing about mentally ill people, it's so fun to look into the ways that war affects the psyche of not only one person, but a different person in a slightly different situation who have the same background, they have the same family, they have the same lives up until a certain point. I think it's interesting, and that's it. And I'm probably being overly cautious, but I do think that we're in a world where unfortunately that's kind of necessary. And yeah, I don't agree with a lot of the people and their views during the war, including, for example, Winston Churchill. I don't appreciate some of his views, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't an incredibly important figure in winning this war, and that he could have decided to sign a peace treaty with Hitler and he didn't, and that was a moral thing more than anything else. It was like, no, you can't do that, mate. Which I appreciate. I think that, you know, you can see the good in the bad, and the book, it's gonna try and deal with that very difficult grey area. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. You can maybe hear I'm like, my throat is so dry. It's really warm again. It went cold for a while and now it's warm again. But like, yeah, that's my historical book. It doesn't have a name. I think I'm gonna go with like the Grapes of Wrath route, which the way that I consider the Grapes of Wrath route is that if you've read the Grapes of Wrath, you get to the line where that is said and you're like, it's like a mic drop moment. It's incredible. And you're like, why is it called the Grapes of Wrath? And then you get there and you're like, oh, that is an incredible name. And I think I'm gonna go with that, where I'm like, if I write a scene and something speaks to me, I will name it that. Like, I'm not gonna worry about the name. So currently it is just called World War II. And so like when I finish with Project Vampire, you will see me talking about Project World War II. That refers to the both of these books, but I will probably only write like the first one, and then I'll write the sequel to Formation Lap, and then I'll maybe write the sequel to this, because I think it maybe is good to take a break and make sure that the first one has been developed a little bit more, so that the timeline for the second isn't then wrong, because they're interconnected. Basically, I haven't mentioned this, and I can, and I'm aware this video is getting really long. The paratroopers that landed on D-Day in Normandy were then met by the people who landed on the beaches that the other main character is a part of. So the work that they do is kind of connected, which is going to be really interesting to write. Also, I'm going to do a kind of present to past thing. I don't know the name of it, which is annoying because there's definitely a word. But like, there's going to be every few chapters, there's going to be a little chapter that goes back in time to things like their childhoods, their time in training, the way that they sort of signed up for the army, the stuff that they did when they were like in limbo, because that's an important factor. Neither of them have actually been in a fight until D-Day. So they're both fresh in the face of war, right? So you can see the vibe that I'm going for, and I think that it's gonna be very much about the characters more than the war itself. But also I want to highlight a couple of things that maybe aren't talked about as much in the grand scheme of the war, like the work that their specific groups did and how brave some of them were, because some of the things that happened during the war, you like barely hear about them, or you hear about them and you hear about how they weren't a good thing, and it's like, no, it wasn't good because a lot of people got hurt, but also the people that didn't die in those fights, they did so well, and they really held out in ways that you wouldn't even expect. And so like, I'm just really excited to educate through fiction. But yeah, if you want to be educated through non-fiction or just have general discussions about stuff, I will link my Substack. I'll also either leave a link or I'll leave the app for my Bookstagram, where I leave quotes from books and stuff. as I'm reading them I take pictures, and yeah, you can go and read like the stuff for this one because there are some quite funny ones in there. And yeah, I think that is what I'm like. I've run out of things to say, but I'm still rambling. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please do stick around if you've already gotten this far. I promise I will be a little bit less all over the place in my head soon. I think it's because it's a Grand Prix weekend, so my brain is kind of just like on Formula One, where even though there's nothing for me to watch right now, I'm just like, but yeah, that's the headspace I'm in. I'm also querying again. I'll do a little video, yeah, when I get more. I can't believe that's this is okay. Yeah, I don't know why this is the way that I'm telling you that I'm querying again, but yeah, Formation Lab is being queried right now. I made a video talking about why I brought it off. I'll try and put that in the suggestion thing. I don't know how to do that really, but I'll try. And I guess my main thing is that I'm trying my best to get this Project Vampire book finished, to get Formation Lab published, and then to plan Project WWII. Because I think that that's the order that I want to go in. And yeah, so yeah, stick along, check the description, check the video that I suggest, and it'll be there, won't it? But yeah, have fun. Sorry, I'm in a woo kind of mood, but that's fine. And bye. Is the longest day? No.